Welcome back to another baking lesson. Sorry about the rooster. Today we're going to be making a banana cake, and I'm going to go through the instructions and explain how to make this one, just like with the chocolate cake, and you'll see the similarities and differences. And I assure you that I already washed my hands before I got started, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into reading the instructions and making the cake. So the banana cake, first mix together 2 bananas mashed, 1 egg, 1 cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of cooking oil, 1/4 cup of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 2 cups of wheat flour, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And like I explained in the last lesson, cinnamon is something that's an optional ingredient, but it really helps to improve the flavor of the cake. Once you have all those things mixed together, pour the mixture into a saucepan and bake it in a larger saucepan containing water and covered with a lid for 30 minutes. It is done when the toothpick stuck in the middle comes out clean, and we'll see how that goes after we start cooking ours. So first of all, 2 bananas. I have 2 normal sized bananas here, but if you have the small bananas that are like half the size, then you would use 4 of them instead of 2. And if you have matoke, the cooking bananas that have turned ripe, they're yellow, if you don't want to eat them, you can mash them up and bake them into this cake. As long as it's a sweet banana, then it will be fine. You notice that the amount of sugar is way less than in the chocolate cake, and part of that is because this one has bananas in it, and they are sweet, and they add to the sweetness of the cake. So let's go ahead and get started with the bananas. So first, we want to mash our bananas up. They don't need to be turned into a complete puree, but they need to be in small pieces. And then as the cake cooks, they'll get mixed in with everything else. So there's 1 banana. And it's always good if the banana is especially ripe. So even if it's starting to turn a little bit brown and mushy, that's okay, because it will be even more sweet than the ones that are closer to being green. I like eating the ones that are more green anyway, so this is a good use for the ones that have gotten too ripe to be added. And there are a few ants, a little bit of extra protein in our cake. Okay, so you can mash it with some spoon or fork or something, or you can just squish it with your hands if you have washed your hands, which you should have anyway, until it is mashed together. Just kind of makes a mess. If you're doing this with a group of people, one person can get their hands messy mashing up the banana, and then other people can do the rest of the ingredients. But since I'm doing this alone, I'm going to have to wash my hands off after I'm done mashing the banana. So it kind of depends on a person's preference whether they want the banana really mashed or they want some chunks of banana in the cake. I don't mind having a few chunks of banana in the cake, but if you want it to be really smooth, you can go ahead and mash it until it's super smooth. Alright, that is pretty well mashed, and now my hands are all banana-y. So I'm going to rinse them off real quick, and then I'll come back and show you the rest. Alright, the banana is done, and so let me give you a closer look of how it looks mashed up. So I've got some little chunks in there, but it's mostly smooth. The next ingredient is an egg, and it's always wise to crack your egg into another container, because if the egg is spoiled and you put it directly in with the cake ingredients, then you have to throw the whole thing out. So at worst, you throw out 1 egg if you put it into a bowl, but this one is okay, so we can go ahead and add it. There's our 1 egg. Then we need 1 cup of milk. Remember that we're using the measurements on this nice cup that we made the last time, so 1 cup is there. So here is my milk. You don't have to use milk that's bought from the store. If you have a cow, go ahead and use the fresh milk and that will be fine. 1 cup of milk. Then we need 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. Another reminder that when we look at our measuring spoons, the bigger one is the tablespoon and the smaller one is the teaspoon. So 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. I'm going to do it over this cup again just to make sure that I don't spill. There's 1. And 2. Okay, next we have 1/4 cup of sugar and, well, almost lost the spoon. If you are going to be doing a lot of baking, it's good to make more than one of these measuring cups. One of them you can use for the dry materials, one of them you can use for the wet materials, but if you don't care, you can use the same one and it'll just stick a little bit and you scrape it out when you're putting it into the cake. So sugar is here, 1/4 cup is down there at the bottom. Okay, there is 1/4 cup of sugar. Alright, not bad. Next, we have 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So our teaspoon, the small spoon. And remember how we want to measure level with the spoon. There's a whole teaspoon and I'm going to divide it in half. Remove half, and now half is left. I can add that one to the cake. The same thing with the baking powder. This is a different container than the last time, but it's the same thing, baking powder. I want to make it level with my tablespoon. Try not to lose it here. Okay, there's 1 level tablespoon of baking powder. Then I have 2 cups of wheat flour. And my wheat flour again. So I'm going to fill to 1 cup and then I'll do it a second time. And again, we want to shake, not tap the cup. And I've put in too much. There, still too much. Okay, now it's okay, there's 1 cup. And 1 more cup. Alright, looks good. 2 cups. And then the last thing, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. I have cinnamon, so I'm going to add it. Remember, this one is a spice that you can get from a supermarket. So 1 teaspoon. Again, I want it to be level. 1 level teaspoon. That looks pretty level, but just to be sure. There's 1 teaspoon. Alright, so those are all the materials. I need to mix it together until everything is combined well. And I'm going to make sure that there aren't any big chunks of dry materials like the flour or the baking powder in here. But again, I don't need to beat it. So it's stirred together. I don't see any chunks of flour. So that's all that we need to do. So we want to do the same thing that we did the other time. Put a little bit of cooking oil into our saucepan. Just a little bit, not a lot. Enough that I can cover the bottom and the sides with a very thin layer of cooking oil so that the cake won't stick. And then I pour my cake into the saucepan. Alright, so that is the very simple process of mixing up a banana cake. I'm going to get the other saucepan ready with the hot water, and then we'll be back to see how we cook this one. Okay, the cake is mixed together, the water is boiling on the gas cooker, and we're going to follow the same process that we did for the chocolate cake. I'm going to put this smaller saucepan with the cake inside here, put the cover on, and then for this one we're going to wait 30 minutes before we check it to see if it's ready. So water is boiling. Put my cake inside carefully. So there's enough water again so that it's floating, but not so much that it's going to overflow into the cake. I close it. It is now almost 2 o'clock, so just before 2:30 we'll come back and check to see if the cake is done. Alright, it has now been 30 minutes, so we're going to check our cake and see if it is finished. Again, I'm going to remove the cover off to the side so that the water doesn't pour into my cake. And it looks like the cake is done, so let's just take a closer look. There's the cake. You can see it's risen nicely. I'm going to do the same thing with the toothpick where I poke it into the very middle of the cake, all the way down, and then pull it out. This time, you can see that at the tip of the toothpick, there's a little bit of sort of gooey cake batter that looks like it did when we mixed it up. So it's not quite done. We're going to need to give it a little bit more time. So even though it looks like it's done from the top, it's not completely done on the inside. So we need to cover it back up and let it continue cooking for a while. So I'm going to give it 5 more minutes before we check it again. But a good thing to note about making cakes using this method of steaming is that as long as there's water remaining inside the big saucepan, your cake is not going to burn. So you can continue baking. Even if you baked it for an hour and a half, it would still be fine and it wouldn't burn as long as there's still water inside there. So let's come back in 5 more minutes and check it again. Alright, we're back after 5 minutes, and now it's time to check on the cake again, see if it's ready. So let me remove the cover. Still looking good, there's still some water in there. Take the toothpick again. So I'm going to put it into a different spot than when I put it before. It's very hot. Alright, so coming out, you can see there are little pieces of cake on there. So it is done. Now we can go ahead and remove the cake out of our saucepan. Let me turn off that one. And take it out. Ooh, ouch. Alright, there's the finished cake. We're going to do the same thing we did the last time and let it cool for a while before we try to take it out of the saucepan. Okay, now it's time to see if we can get our cake successfully out of our saucepan. So again, it's helpful, it's still hot, to use a knife to go around the edge of the cake to make sure there's not a place where it's sticking. And then to kind of shake or tap it until you can feel that it's loose. Put a plate on top, flip it over. I can feel that it fell down onto the plate. And then remove our saucepan. It's nice and smooth there on the top. Right back like this. So if you're not satisfied with the way that it looks on the top here, you can just cut with a knife until it's smooth, and then you can put the flat surface onto your plate and put icing over the top of it, and no one will be able to tell that it was bumpy, and you get to eat that part that you cut off. But if you're just going to eat it like this, then there it is. It smells really nice, and I'm looking forward to tasting it. I hope you're making one at home and also looking forward to tasting yours. If you are going to ice a cake, you need to wait until it's cooled completely before you put the icing. So this one is still quite warm. I would have to wait if I wanted to put any icing on it. But I think it's good just as it is. And we will save the icing for another lesson.